Welcome, everyone. We're going to have a little chat today. Take your calls, see what's on your mind. I'm very interested in knowing what you guys thought about Tulsi Gabbard and some of her comments from last week. Really got a few things on my mind in terms of China and its lockdowns and what the implications are of that for the policy of lockdowns generally and what we all think about that. But really, I just want your thoughts today. So we'll be taking calls. I'll be over at Twitter Spaces to pick you up. And let's get right to it.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
And welcome, everybody. Again, here we are. I think it's interesting, and Susan, I don't know about how you feel, but I feel actually more jet lagged today than I did last Friday, which is
really
odd and weird. I don't know why that is, but there we are.
I'm better today.
I am not. I don't know what that is. So if I glitch or if I have trouble concentrating or I seem like I'm losing my way, there's an explanation for it.
You can't blame COVID this time.
No, I can't blame COVID. So we'll be here today, tomorrow, and Wednesday this week. We have confirmed on Wednesday Dr. Ryan Cole with Dr. Kelly. And then next week, I think we have the Florida, is that true? Yes, Joe Lapido, the Florida, there he is, Surgeon General. Interested in talking to that guy and hearing what he thinks about some of the choices he made and some of the heat he has been under for having made some good choices. And, you know, it's talking to Tulsi Gabbard, if anything, taught me one thing about some of the social media environments, which is that there are clearly people out there just raising hell, whether they're bots or whether it's foreign agencies. I don't know what it is. But when I had the chance to talk to Tulsi about the World Economic Forum and her lack of involvement with them and why she had been even thought of as part of that organization, she had a perfectly reasonable explanation. She's an honest person. I don't understand this immediate run to call everybody a liar. If everybody's a liar, then good luck to you because you're not going to be able to trust or listen to anybody. Doesn't seem like a very productive sort of life. But I would judge Tulsi Gabbard to be a honest person. She gave her explanation, and there's armies of bots out there immediately sort of taking issue with it and sort of undermining what she said. And I thought, boy, that is familiar to me. There is so much that I experience on Twitter in terms of the kinds of feedback. Like, for instance, I put up a tweet just last night where somebody was saying, oh my goodness, it's going to be so sad. We've called it into a pandemic and people are getting on with their lives, but 2,600 people are going to die next week. And I thought, yeah, it is sad. It's sad that we're biological. It's sad that we have lots of things that kill us. And I just reposted that and said, look, it's sad. Not only that it's going to take its place alongside the usual causes of death. 11,000 people are going to die next week due to cancer. These are, I rounded down, by the way, in all this data. 11,000 from heart disease, 9,000 from stroke, thousands from, what were some of the other things I put up there? But the point is there are 60,000 people are going to die next week of medical conditions. Why we have singled out infectious disease to become hysterical about is sort of odd to me. We know that locking down doesn't work. Look at China. Look at what's going on there. This is a government that has a history of having no difficulty displacing millions of people. That's how it was founded. It's one of its founding operations, killed millions, displaced millions. And now they've adopted that policy to their attempts at containment of respiratory viruses that anyone who's studied infectious diseases and who has looked at this pandemic, has looked at what we have done, and looked at what various countries have done, can say very clearly, there's no way, there's what I said up there, 1,900 due to drug overdoses, 3,800 due to accidents. Just drug overdoses and accidents, you're going to have over 5,500 people dying next week. So why don't that's double the COVID deaths. Why don't we focus on that and have a complete meltdown about the fact that 3,800 people are going to die of unintended accidents, most of those young, 1,900 drug overdoses, most of those young. We should be exorcised about that if we're going to be exorcised about 2,600 COVID cases. Not to minimize how sad 2,600 COVID deaths are. It is. But we've chosen to privilege infectious disease over all other medical conditions. And these horrific measures, i.e. lockdowns, that you're seeing literally people being burned to death in buildings. Did you see that, Susan? Where people were locked in from the outside. There was a fire and they all died in a building fire. Young people, again, young, healthy people killed, as opposed to COVID, which kills mostly elderly and infirm. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be protected. They should be focused protection on those folks. But to lock everybody down with the faulty notion that somehow you're going to control a respiratory virus is just deeply flawed. It doesn't work like that. Now, when you look back at sort of our policies of, safety uber alles as we rush to a vaccine, that actually looks more sane to me now, looking at China, than just the lockdown safety uber alles with no plan. Is this here or is this in China?
This is the current information on daily new confirmed COVID-19 cases per million in China. Look at that line close to the end there, even after 2020.
Yeah, that's right. And I've read some threads where people are concerned that Omicron, because there's really no good immunity amongst the Chinese, that Omicron may have a more serious effect on them. Maybe, I'm not sure. You could argue that they did perhaps escape some of the worst of Alpha and Delta. Interesting. They might.
Because they quarantined?
Because of the way they quarantined and things.
But also there's so many people in China too. And they live in very close proximity to one another.
It's just, you can't control a respiratory virus like this. When this whole
But locking it down isn't necessarily going to make it slow down, right?
It might slow down, but it's going to come. In other words, if COVID was going to cause 1 million deaths, it was going to cause 1 million deaths. The time frame could be altered a little bit, but 1 million deaths was going to happen almost no matter what we did, unless we did a really great job of focused protection of the people that were most likely to die. Trying to protect the entire population clearly was a fool's errand, clearly didn't work, and it's hard for me to understand why we are even discussing the possibility of these things. School closure didn't work. Didn't have any real effect. Masking children didn't have any real effect. It's hard to understand. Again, if it did have measurable effect, I'd be all for it, right? Just look at what's going on in China. Just look at that. That was the model. We now know Dr. Fauci was interviewed on the record under oath that one of his cohorts went to China, came back, was lied to and distorted and given a lot of faulty information by the Chinese government, came home and said, we have to do the same thing, told the Italian colleagues, we have to do the same thing. This is the way to do this. It was a horrible, horrible, horrible mistake.
Yeah.
It was a terrible mistake. I understand why they made it. It was a mistake. Let's just call it what it was.
You do?
And what?
You understand why they did it?
They were in a panic, and they believed the people they were talking to, and I think they felt they didn't have much other options. And I see the absolute desire to get to vaccine. That, with China right now, there's no end in sight, right? They're going to lock down till COVID completely goes away. Yeah. No, that's never going to happen.
They lock employees inside their businesses and they don't let them out.
Well, now they have these phone mechanisms that if you switch to a yellow card, it's almost like soccer, you no longer can go into businesses or your home. And so homelessness now is exploding in China. God. So
I haven't really looked into it. I just was looking at my stocks and heard about the crash today and what was going on economically. And I just think that they're causing more world trouble with this kind of behavior.
Well, certainly to the extent that the world is dependent on the Chinese economy and manufacturing. But look, the point is that you see their history. They have no problem moving millions of people around, come what may. That's what their history has been. And now they're doing that again. They don't have a problem with that kind of thing. In this country, I like to think we are horrified at such a thing. and we would never contemplate it. And the fact that it happened here should give us pause, especially without any evidence, any scientific backing, and now a track record where it very clearly did not work. And to cling to these things as opposed to do a postmortem analysis on what went wrong or what we might have done better is just, it's so confusing to me. I wish I could understand it. Similarly, the lack of willingness to talk about some of the questions about vaccine therapy, right? And so I saw Dr. Jha, who is one of the federal officials in the I think the CDC is where he is, and very well-trained guy, knows what he's talking about, and he is just sticking with the vaccine for everybody policy. And then he says anyone else is just sort of a what do you call him? Some dude on Twitter. And my question is, why? What are we doing, say, with a 25-year-old male who has essentially zero? Let's just take a 25-year-old male. 25-year-old male has almost zero risk of severe COVID. The vaccine will not prevent infection with COVID. The vaccine will not prevent that 25-year-old from spreading COVID. This is the piece that people seem to miss. They just can't seem to get that through their head. And there's a real incidence of myocarditis and supraventricular arrhythmias. Seems relatively reversible, seems like it's going to turn out okay. But these are healthy people with no risk that we make sick. Why are we doing that? That what should be the discussion. They never talk about it. They just say, do it. In fact, this guy was saying, what do your doctors say all the time? To listen to your doctors. I thought, no, pediatricians are not demanding people get vaccinated with COVID. Their adolescents are being sort of reasoned. They're going to give in, options. They're not being sort of, again, mandated to vaccine. And the same thing confuses me about the masks. Here's what we know about masks for sure. Cloth masks don't work. Surgical masks don't work. Surgical masks are designed to keep mouth bacteria from falling into somebody's abdomen when it's open in surgery, or what other soft tissue might be open to the world. You don't want mouth bacteria falling in. You don't want spit going in. That would cause horrific infection. Not viral infection, bacterial infection. So what do we do in a care of a patient that has severe tuberculosis or infectious viral illness, something like that, some respiratory illness? We wear N95 masks from the moment we are exposed to that patient until we are no longer exposed. You don't take it off to eat. You don't take it off, for a trail mix, while you're on the plane. But there it is. Cloth masks do not work. No, as effectively as other masks. The cloth masks do not work. Even that headline is bizarre. When is that from, Caleb?
Wait, let me check. It's a New York Times.
Probably 2020 or something. But
2022.
They don't work.
January 14th.
Well, they don't work. And surgical masks don't work.
Took them a while.
N95s do work. N95s do work. If you would like to protect yourself, you don't protect other people with an N95. People wear these cloth talismans as though they're, signaling how great they are to protect the world.
With pretty flowers on them.
You don't protect the world with a mask. You don't protect anybody. Yeah. You can protect yourself.
I found it interesting that we went to like 9 different cities in 3 different countries,
yep.
And then we jumped on a subway and everybody wore a mask on there in Spain. But
not everybody, by the way.
All 6 of us came home and did not get COVID.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was expecting one of us to at least come home sick.
Yeah.
Or even anything, a cold or something.
Right. Usually that'd be the case.
We were fine. We were in a cruise with a bunch of people. They didn't COVID test us this time.
They'd had a COVID outbreak on that ship.
Yeah, but only one couple, and they stayed there for like 4 months.
No.
They got it twice.
I know, but there was an outbreak on the ship.
But we did not get it this time.
No, we didn't.
We were, it's funny because I wasn't afraid, and I thought, well, I don't care if I get COVID. I'm having a good time, but it was just shocking that out of the 6 of us, nobody got sick. So, maybe we have good immunity or.
All right. Let's see. Why am I laughing at this? Salty Method says, I don't know what I'm laughing at, so you can help me with that. Recommending the vaccine.
Okay, so
I was still recommending the vaccine a month ago. I still recommend the vaccine for everybody over 65. All my patients over 65, are boosted, vaccinated, bivalent boosted. They get it all. And it's clear to me it's helping them. Lots of COVID amongst my patients too. Paxlovid has worked like crazy for my patients.
I have to tell you about salty methods.
Okay.
I don't think salty methods is salty methods all the time on Rumble, because we have a joker out there that likes to portray themselves as people on Rumble. So that's why I'm not on there today, because I don't want weird things coming out of my voice on Rumble. But I don't know. Salty and who was the other one that was getting it the other day? I can't remember.
The point is that this guy takes over people's monikers.
We have an imposter.
Yeah, and says horrible things and pretends to be them. So, okay. So as I was saying, go ahead. Yep.
If I can just ask a couple questions about the China part of this, because I've been watching that while you've been out of town. So first, do you think that any of this data is accurate at all if it's China reporting it? Because it doesn't make any sense to me that the line is so low in early 2020 and then just starts peaking over here. Do you think that the data, the rest of it, isn't quite accurate?
I think the early data was probably not that accurate. I suspect that's true.
And so look,
we all know, think about this kind of, look, see how much better a job we're doing at testing and educating people who needs testing and that kind of thing. We're picking things up much better now. And I think that's them as well.
The other thing that I had read
why they had nothing all that time is kind of odd too. So I'm guessing there was something kind of cruising along there. They just weren't picking it up. Remember, Omicron can be very mild.
Right. I was looking at this. So if you look at these charts, I actually don't have that to pull up, but if you look at this exact same chart and you compare the people infected with COVID versus COVID deaths, you can see that the deaths are so much lower during this peak than it was before, even if you can trust the data that's coming out of China. But I was looking at this in the context of all of the protests and the riots that are going on around the Apple factories in China right now, and how the information that's coming out of the country seems to show that they're not only mad and upset about some issues with their paychecks, but also with the lockdowns. The whole culture seems tired of the lockdowns there.
Yes.
And I had read something interesting that seemed to show that China is possibly afraid of enormous outbreaks and a crisis situation from COVID, when most of the world has, somewhat moved beyond that.
Correct.
Because their vaccine that was developed in China does not have anywhere near the efficacy of the vaccines anywhere else, but China can't purchase it out of their country.
Right, that's right. And unfortunately, they could bring the Covaxin in from India, but they're not doing that for some reason. But let's look back at what our country did. So our country took aggressive measures with the notion that once we get to the vaccine, we'll be able to lighten up and everything will go back to normal. Now, the vaccine was not as efficacious as we thought it was initially, but we did do a good job of getting to a vaccine. We did it. We did what we wanted to do. And see, when people are vilifying the vaccine, the real sort of discussion needs to happen is how much added risk were they willing to take in the deployment of this vaccine relative to any other vaccine? It's obvious they were willing to take a lot more risk. I'm sure somebody somewhere quantified it. I would like to know what that quantification was. Where was the conversation when they decided, you know what, normally we allow, 6 deaths per 10 million or something for a vaccine. I don't know what the data is, but for this one, we got to get out of this mess. We're going to accept much higher complication rates than we ever would. And what I wonder is, in doing so, have they stay wedded to that notion when it's now clearer that risk may not be warranted or worth taking for younger people and younger males in particular? Right. And why they aren't adjusting course. Why aren't they adjusting course? So again, back to the lockdown. Their lockdown looks less draconian compared to China, where there's literally no end in sight. So it looks somewhat more rational here, even though it was not effective. It was deployed in incompetent ways, and it was just not a great idea. It was really not well done. It should have been much more really the way the Great Barrington Declaration suggested it, where you're looking at focused protection of the people at risk. But okay, so they did it. why again they're not sort of reevaluating it is just hard for me to understand. But go ahead.
Right.
What
That
other
was
question you have, Caleb?
that was my last follow-up question there is, do you think that, let's say they all came out right now, it's Dr. Fauci came out and the pharma companies came out and all of them, and they said, they were just straight up and honest. And they said, look, we didn't know what was going on here. We know that there's things that are going wrong. This vaccine has an efficacy of 60%. We were billing it at 90 something, but we weren't fully honest. Do you think it would actually make a change with the people where they would calm down and say, all right, well, now you're being a little bit more honest with us with numbers that are not good sales figures for you? Do you think people would gain more trust
let me even adjust it. Let me just even adjust a little further. We did think it was 90% plus effective at first. It was only with time that we learned it wasn't that way with deployment and use. But so the point is, but your question is, why aren't they more transparent and honest? And you and I both have taken the policy, and that's why we're interviewing people that have sort of opinions that may not be mainstream or may not be accurate. We want to hear what they have to say. We both, you and I, believe that absolute freedom of the expression is the way to get through this, and to hide it from people is going to continue to create really serious problems. So
absolutely.
So, my approach is, I got nothing to hide. I'm completely, where I was wrong. Where my opinion has been adjusted, I will happily tell you. And how I'm using the vaccine now, I've no problem talking about, and the Paxlovid, which I also use. I've got feelings about all this that may or may not be exactly accurate, but I'm more than happy to share these things. So we got a bunch of requested callers up here. I want to get you guys over at Twitter Spaces. Now, what we're doing is, if you raise your hand at Twitter Spaces, I will be selecting you and bringing you up, and you'll be streaming out on multiple platforms, including Twitch, Twitter, as we know, Twitter, Facebook, what else? Wherever you can, Rumble, wherever you can see things, we tend to put things up there. Let's get Mike Burt. What's up, Susan?
I don't know. You're just like, oh, what? Where are we again?
We're what? Did I seem out of it?
No, you just can't remember all the platforms we're on.
Yeah.
We're
Okay.
everywhere.
We're on so many.
We're like God. We're everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's like a broadcast that's a narrowcast. Mike Burt, you can unmute your mic in the lower left-hand corner.
Hey, mommy.
Hey, mommy. What's up?
Hey, I'm getting frustrated because every time I listen to anything about Fauci not knowing anything, I'm looking at a Yahoo article right now. In October 2020, October 26th, Fauci said that COVID-19 vaccines will only prevent symptoms, not block the virus. He was being honest to begin with, and he changed his tune somewhere along the line.
Is he now saying it will prevent infection?
No. In 2020, before the election,
I remember that.
He was saying, yeah, I'm looking at it right now. And
no,
it's still
he said
online.
that, but nobody heard it because the news stations were all just saying, oh, you got to get the vaccine because it's going to prevent COVID. Like, he said
Yeah, exactly. In February, it changed 180 degrees, and I don't know what happened, but it went squirrely then. But I have a question, Dr. Drew.
Yeah, buddy.
I'm Canadian. I am vax-free, and I have a business trip in January, but America still won't let non-citizens in. They're over, like, flying through the air. But some people squeak through over the border, right? Because they sometimes ask. Can we get people on board, like, talking about this? Because I'm trying to get Scott Adams and his group to talk about it. I'm trying to get Cernovich to talk about it. I'm trying to get everybody to start talking about, like, letting people in, because their nonsense isn't working, and they know it, but it's hurting people that are trying to get in. It's just like, I'm trying to work. I'm trying to make a living.
Yeah.
I already lost a job because of this. I don't want to lose this one, but I got to do business in the States.
Susan,
can we start talking about opening these borders?
Yeah, I agree. Susan, what did we got no hassle from these other countries.
American citizens could come in
without the vaccine.
Yeah, but I think we've already uploaded our vaccine card on every airline we've ever flown on.
I see.
I mean, they weren't asking for it on the outbound, were they? Did we have to share our vaccine card?
American citizens don't really have to do anything, but people coming into the States that aren't citizens is a big issue.
It's so ridiculous.
I know. Like, I think
I don't know. It's not really a thing in American consciousness, because Scott Adams wasn't even aware of this, that non-citizens can't come in right now if they're not vaccinated.
it makes no sense, right? Because the idea is, well, you can't come in because you could be infectious. But guess what? Vaccinated, unvaccinated makes no difference. Makes no difference.
That's exactly it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to get down into the consciousness and try to get people talking about it because it directly affects me right now. But let's face it.
Seems like
affects
it's
a lot of other
opening
people
up
too,
a
right?
little bit more. It's starting to loosen up. So keep checking.
Yeah,
Because
when we were leaving for Europe, it was unclear what we were going to have to do. That maybe I had
for
to
some
get a
reason,
booster.
Canada's behind.
But no, it's
you know.
U.S. And so all of a sudden,
No, the States is behind.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But I think
tyrannical Canada, Trudeau abandoned all that months ago.
Yeah,
but for some reason,
understand
Biden's still holding on
But
to
what
it.
I want to say is that many countries were still requiring boosters a month ago, in addition to the initial vaccine series. And so when we
I agree. Yeah.
when we were traveling, I was like, oh crap,
Okay,
I don't want to get a booster right now.
because I'm a travel agent, I've been reading a lot about the entrance requirements. Check and see if you can just get a COVID test to get on the plane
That
if
is
you
another,
are unvaccinated.
That is another way around a lot of this. Is you get
Yeah.
tested, and you get a whole bunch of, you just get regular testing.
You just get a COVID test before you get on the plane, and then when you go back, you're probably fine. So double check with the airlines.
no.
Different airlines have different rules, but I think like United and American and stuff like that, like don't use a Canadian Air or whatever.
Thanks, Mike. What we're going to do is keep taking calls here. Many of you have your hands up. I will get to all you guys. We're going to take a little break and be right back. I have some pretty exciting news. Our favorite skincare brand, Genucel, is having a holiday preview sale. It just went live for all the products that Susan and I love. Genucel's Silky Smooth XV Moisturizer soaks right into my skin instantly, and with its immediate effects, you can see the fine lines and wrinkles disappearing within 12 hours. And Susan loves, of course, the Genucel Vitamin C Serum, infused with the purest vitamin C that absorbs to the deepest layers of the skin because of their proprietary skincare technology.
I am a snob when it comes to using products on my face. The dermatologist makes a ton of money from me. But when I was introduced to Genucel, I was so happy because it's so affordable and it works great. I was introduced to the Ultra Retinol Cream, which I love at night. All the eye creams are amazing. People notice my skin all the time, and I'm so excited because it's actually working.
And for a limited time, take advantage of the Genucel Holiday Preview Sale and save up to 60% off our favorite Genucel products. 60% off. Treat yourself this holiday season. Go to genucel.com/Drew. That's genucel.com/Drew, genucel.com/Drew. My guest is Philip Patrick. He is a precious metal specialist, trains at University of Redlands. He has spent years as a wealth manager at Citigroup, and his current position is with Birch Gold Group. So gold has always been somewhat of a safe haven, particularly in times of great turmoil, much like our present moment, I imagine.
Gold has always traditionally been a safe haven asset. Gold specifically has always been about wealth preservation, right? Gold has always held its buying power. You can look at as far back as you'd like in history. In biblical times, 1 ounce of gold would buy somebody 400 loaves of bread. And today it does the same thing. So it's a store of value. But I would say in times like this, as you mentioned, it's particularly important when you're dealing with things like 40-year high inflation, the air that's coming out of a stock market bubble. These times in particular tend to drive gold and silver up quite significantly. If things are different, the solution needs to be different as well. So I encourage everyone to get informed, and we have a lot of good information here to help your listeners.
Just a reminder, I am not a financial advisor, and I do not give out financial advice nor investing advice. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, countless 5-star reviews, and thousands of satisfied customers. Check them out now. Visit birchgold.com/Drew and secure your future with gold. Do it now. Susan, there. That is literally on a building in Los Angeles. We gotta
Downtown LA.
Yeah, maybe we'll go. Susan said all
The homeless are waving at you.
That's what she said. That's what she said. We'll go. You and I'll run by that next week. See if that's still
Yeah, it's
there.
very cool. But anyways, I got some new Genucel products I want to tell you. They sent a probiotic cream, and I put it on, and I love it.
Okay.
It just smooths on, and also the eyelash enhancer.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna use that
There you mentioned.
on my eyebrows too.
You mentioned you like that.
But I'm using all the other stuff up, so that stuff's good. Hyaluronic acid's really amazing, and also my favorite, the vitamin C.
Yeah, you were using that all through
DFS.
Europe,
Serum.
I noticed, right?
Oh yeah, that stuff is awesome. So check it out.
All right. Thank you for that, Susan. And let's get Nico in here. Nico wants to ask a question. Again, raise your hand if you want to talk. We'll just come right to you. And you'll be out on multiple streaming platforms if you come on up. And you have to unmute your mic in the lower left-hand corner. There you are. Hey, Nico, what's going on?
Hey, Dr. Drew. Yeah, first let me just say thanks to you, Caleb, and Susan for kind of protecting our civil discourse on this topic.
Trying.
It's kind of sort of strange that we lost that, but I wanted to bring something up. I'm not sure if you guys have touched on this already. I was just reading about this G20 global leader declaration that is referring to a need for a global digital health certificate. Sounds an awful lot like a global vaccine passport. Sounds a bit unbelievable, but you can just look this up online and read on the White House's website. The letter is listed there, and of course, some news outlets are covering it. Epoch Times, I think, had an article on it, but none of the mainstream publications have really been reporting on it. It seems like something we should be talking about.
What is it?
So it's basically just a letter that was signed by a bunch of important global leaders in the G20, including Biden, and the.
Lost you. I hope that's a coincidence and not somebody from the G20 jumping in. There you are. You're back. So we lost you for a second.
Oh, great. Yeah, so the letter is just recommending a handful of things when it comes to the environment and a global health. But one of the things it mentions is the need for a WHO standardized global digital health passport.
Now, is that
now?
Hang on. Is that so people have an electronic medical record they can move around with, or is that some sort of passport?
Yeah, so from my understanding, and I'm trying to still look into this myself, to be honest with you, but my understanding is that it would essentially be a digital health record, as you mentioned, but it would be necessary to travel internationally. I don't think it's been said what sort of requirements your digital record would need to have, if that makes sense. So I'm not sure. Yeah, so I just think it's something that people should be talking about more, and certainly, should be something that journalists are reporting on.
It doesn't. When I put it in the sort of Google search, nothing comes up.
Yeah. So if you look up, I'm totally with you. It's bizarrely hard to find, but G20 Bali Leaders Declaration, and there's a White House website. It's the whitehouse.gov, their website, that actually lists the entire letter. It can be read there.
There it is.
Yeah. But like I said, for some reason, no, outlets seem to be reporting on it, except a handful, like Epoch Times and maybe one or two others. But none of the mainstream outlets are really talking about this, which seems concerning.
I'm hoping this is just rhetorical nonsense. You know what I mean? Like, just
hopefully.
Yeah. It looks like a lot of fluff. Like a lot of time and energy was spent sending people to Bali to create a big fluffy document.
Right. Yeah. I'd recommend people take a look at it. And there's also a video of the chairman of the G20 that was from Bali, Indonesia, that was basically hosting this G20 summit.
Yeah.
And he also talks about the need for this digital health certificate.
Well, they're also talking about here a universal health coverage, which, pretty crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wasn't even aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I appreciate you.
Whoop.
Time Doctor, just was wondering if you'd heard of that, but I'll definitely stay keyed in here and keep up the great work.
I appreciate it. Thank you, my friend. And I will look for that. Caleb.
I love the rooster crowing in the background. I don't like the reverb, but.
Well, Caleb, my phone is normal. Everything is good. It's just,
I think it was on his end because he was.
Okay, it might have been on his end because it just kept replaying it.
Yep.
The crowing was funny.
But yeah, if you go to the G20, G20 declaration, Bali, it does come right up. All right, let's keep going here. See what you guys want to talk about. What else going on? Somebody said something on the restream. I wanted to quote. Somebody said we're advising Susan. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name over here. That I should go get my heart evaluated. Susan. I think she's worried that because I had the vaccine and because I had a weird vaccine reaction, that I might have a cardiac risk. I had massive cardiac evaluations, way above sort of the routine screening procedures that we do medically for people to screen out cardiac disease, as a sort of threshold testing I needed to get through to go to the Wadi Rum Desert to do the
we'll show a clip of that at the end.
The Special Forces TV show, which was all kinds of cardiac stuff, and went through that just fine, no problem.
I mean, some people are affected by it and some people aren't. I mean, it doesn't mean that you won't be.
This is the thing about. I've been
thinking.
You had
the one Janssen & Janssen, which
Yeah, and I've been thinking a lot about the vaccine. We need to know the numbers. We need to know, is it just really a trivial, sad but trivial number of people that have very serious adverse events, or is it some larger number? Oh, there's my adverse event. I got a spontaneous raccoon eye on the left, which is the presenting sign of the consumptive coagulopathy that we've seen and heard about from the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. It's actually the presenting sign of a clot in the skull called the transverse sinus, and raccoon's eyes can be that presenting manifestation. So there we are, and I went on without any further neurological symptoms, and I felt terrible, but presumably no serious complications. I've been seeing a lot of supraventricular arrhythmias. I've been seeing a lot of strokes in young people. I've been seeing, those are the main thing. We're seeing all these sudden death reports, but sudden death has always been around. The question is that some sort of confirmation bias that, now we're having it fed to us by social media? Are we feeling like we're seeing more of something that has always been incidental, but now it feels like it's more common? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. This is Chabria. Get him in here. Hey there. Chabria.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey, this is Shaban. How are you?
Hey, good.
Thank you. I've been listening very intently, and I think you make some fantastic points. And I just want to make a few more that I'm not sure you did. So
please, go ahead.
You said something interesting about having only infectious diseases being responsible for a lot of deaths, and how everybody's kind of focused on a lot of infectious diseases, but there's so many other diseases that cause a lot of deaths. And the one thing I always kind of think about is that if you had an epidemic or a pandemic of UTI, you'd have a lot of people die, because it's basically a disease that's spreading through the most vulnerable population, the oldest individuals. So sure, it's some of this is the ACE receptor and a respiratory tract, but any organ system that was responsible for an infection in the right population or the right vulnerable population could give you the same numbers, because yes. I always wonder how much of this is specific to a respiratory virus. So I don't know if that point was raised. And the other point I wanted to raise was the human genome, depending on what study you look at, is 30 to 80% viruses. Kind of highlighting that we are all basically a compendium of viruses, and viruses predated us, and they'll be here long after we are gone. The next point I wanted to make was the rise of RSV and influenza. I think really is a function of declining humoral immunity in the context of people being indoors. And we are seeing this in children, and the fact that you're seeing even more severe respiratory illnesses in a population that, anybody who's had a child, children are falling sick every year. And I've seen patients who haven't been sick for a couple of years, and then, when they do get infected with an upper respiratory tract infection, it's pretty severe because the immune system has no antigen recognition.
Yeah.
And a couple of more points.
Wait, before you do, let's just sort of zero in on some of these things. So people, the one sort of wrinkle I want to add to what you're saying about the RSV and influenza is people are saying that, well, look how lockdowns work to reduce RSV and influenza, and masking work to reduce RSV and influenza. That is not necessarily true. It might be true. It's not necessarily true. There is a growing consensus that there is such a thing as viral ecology, in the sense that when one virus takes over, it's literally like the lions coming in and pushing out the leopards or the hyenas. Yes. That it just literally pushes it out of the ecology of the system. So the lockdowns and the masks may have not been the reason we had to reduce RSV. It may have been COVID itself.
Yes, and the phenomenon is described as virologic interference.
Yeah,
we don't fully
correct.
Understand why.
Correct.
But there is a phenomenon. And there's a lot of interesting theories that have not yet been clearly elucidated. But you're absolutely right. But what that also did was it decreased our innate immune system's
Yep.
antigen recognition.
Yep.
And in children, this is a bigger problem than in adults, because
Absolutely.
we have memory B cells, and children they need to develop this. They don't have it.
That's right.
And a few more points. So there's
Please.
a video. There's a video from Fauci in 2020 somewhere where he's talking to Mark Zuckerberg, where he actually talks about the possibility of antibody-dependent enhancement. Every now and then you can Google it and it'll come up, but it's fascinating how he did recognize that. And if you remember, there used to be a measles vaccine before this one. I think it was the measles vaccine that actually caused that phenomenon. So everybody in the field of infectious diseases is actually acutely aware that you can have actual neutralization, but you can also have facilitating antibodies. That's not a phenomenon that has been well studied with COVID. There's lots of people saying one thing versus the other, and I think that's another
And to pile on that, we now presently have more deaths in vaccinated COVID patients than unvaccinated.
Absolutely.
So that's a bit of evidence that something might be going on there. So again, we don't know these things, but they've got to be raised. They have to be discussed. They have to be researched. The fact that it's not even brought up is just so. Don't you find that bizarre?
It's not only bizarre, but this has long-term implications in a population that you're vaccinating into oblivion. And, there's original antigenic sin, there's antibody-dependent enhancement, all of these phenomena. If we are to understand what the implications of doing something like this is, we also ought to understand what the short-term and long-term implications are going to be, because everything comes down to, we've done a lot of unprecedented things.
Yes.
And as you know, everything in life is a dose into time response. So you're not going to see the effects of what we've done until many years from now.
Possibly.
Right? Some of this we see, and some of this we don't fully understand.
Yep.
So I think that's stuff nobody's really talking about.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
This should not be taboo. We all should be able to speak this without fear of someone saying, "Oh, you're an anti-vaxxer." Well, that's not true.
No. Well, help me with this. I'm always trying to understand the other side. Because I don't want to be, certainty in medicine is a very dangerous thing, and hubris is a dangerous thing. And I just want to try to understand people that have differing points of view. Maybe you can help me with this, because this is one of the most bewildering parts for me is, why is this the only vaccine I can think of that doesn't have sort of population or age specific deployment? Why is it everybody, period, no other questions asked? Well, particularly when the risk reward is clearly different in different age groups.
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. What we did was we used a blowtorch approach, and then we said, you can't even talk about the little cinders that are burning because, it was all for the greater good. And I think you referred to this previously, which is if you did risk stratification in medicine, everything is a risk benefit analysis. Right?
Everything.
The difference between a drug and a toxin is dose. So where did we forget this? Where did we forget this?
Yeah.
How did we go from that to saying, a 19-year-old is the same risk as a 90-year-old. It kind of blows my mind
beyond
that we went to that point. And if you remember, Ashish Jha, before he was appointed to, whatever he is right now, he used to be on TV saying stuff like vaccine immunity and vaccine antibodies are superior to natural infection. And I would watch that and I would be like, this is antithetical to everything we've been taught in med school. Like literally, and that can't be possible. And nobody questions these things. Like, do other physicians not watch this and be like, that's not even possible, right?
I know. Listen, and again, they run to these extreme positions without any evidence. And then my guess is that because everything is these huge bureaucratic structures, once they get there, they can't unwind it. The bureaucracies aren't efficient enough to unwind their position. I think something like that. That's all I can figure.
It's the sunken fallacy, right? We've gone too far. Let's keep going, right? And I'll two more points and then I'll shut up.
Okay.
One is that remember that the spike protein is also your virulence factor. Does it occur to anybody in and out of medicine that if we're so worried about the virus because of spike protein being a virulence factor, why aren't we worried about giving people a spike protein to prevent them from getting a spike protein that doesn't prevent them from getting the spike protein?
Right.
Like what am I missing?
Yeah, me too. The logic, like what? Like, huh?
Right.
Yes, I'm with you.
And the last point I'll make is you said something about myocarditis, and you said, it's we don't know if it's like a few unfortunate individuals or if there's a greater pattern. And there's another complex layer to this, which is in medicine, everything, in addition to being a risk benefit, is also the tip of the iceberg phenomenon.
Often.
What is manifest in medicine is often that tiny portion of what is below the water. And I always wonder, like, if you are seeing clinically manifest myocarditis, you're seeing it only in an age group in which individuals are prone to exertion, right?
Yes.
So are we missing a lot of individuals that are not undertaking a lot of physical and strenuous exertion, and thereby we think it's not that much because we are not doing routine EKGs, we're not doing routine myocardial MRI.
That's
so
right.
Who knows?
So, however, that is one area where I have a little bit of optimism. They're now starting to find certain markers for myocarditis, humoral markers, that they're going to use more on a more widespread basis. And we might see a lot more subclinical myocarditis as a result. And it might be well outside of the age group that we're all worried about as well.
Yes. In fact, there's a couple of studies looking at troponins.
Yeah.
And turns out that if you do see troponin leaks, what we always classify as non-ischemic leaks, and I'm very excited to see some of that be translated into meaningful clinical evidence and what it means in the long term.
I appreciate your call so much, and thank you for being here. Come in anytime.
No, thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Is he a doctor?
That was good, right? Yes, for sure.
Wow.
And he's talking
Couldn't tell.
about it, and he's just thinking about stuff. And this is the thing that I don't understand why there weren't thousands of other physicians like him and I thinking and talking like that a year and a half ago.
Well, we're afraid of being censored or having our licenses taken away.
And believe me,
you couldn't say anything if you have a license.
Our thoughts were not that different a year ago. We're saying it a little more clearly. We have a little more confidence. Some of the stuff we're saying, a lot of it is a result of me having interviewed all those outliers, all the people like Pierre Corey and
right. But after they
and stuff.
started letting us talk about it again,
I understand. I have a hard time taking myself back to that place a year and a half ago where there was such deep
when we were censored
concern.
every week, like for
yeah, it's really kind
reason.
of remarkable. It really
no, it's awful because now doctors are starting to feel like they can open up a little bit.
This hasn't happened to you guys before in your career, Drew, like this level of just censorship and people trying to shut down your mouth.
This is like bizarre, unthinkable. Like literally, if you told me moon men landed in my backyard, that would make more sense to me in the last couple of years. It really would. It's like, well, okay, that's possible. But what happened to my profession?
And then also you have a platform right now where, like, for example, Kelly Victory can come on and talk about stuff. And she's very happy with the fact that she can do that. But she can't get back on Twitter,
Yeah.
And it's like we're you're giving people an opportunity to speak about what they just couldn't believe was happening either. So it's good that people can call and do this. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, look, I'm feeling,
And not all doctors are willing to take that risk.
but most of us have been talking and sharing ideas like this gentleman just was. They're like, what's going on here? Why are we not thinking about this?
Like, why are kids getting so sick? Like, I know that I had
why
3
are
kids. Like,
why
my
are you
kids are sick all the
masking
time.
5-year-olds and 2-year-olds and why are we masking on planes and then taking the mask off to eat? And why are we making people wear a surgical mask and not an N95? It's just all of it was so dumb and made no sense. And it was really the really horrible thing. It was antithetical to everything I thought I understood about my profession and my country, which is everything had to be evidence-based. There had to be a risk-reward analysis on every recommendation. And then once you make those recommendations, people are free to do as they please.
Well, then they call
and
you
then
a
you don't
quack.
just do it because I said so.
They call you a quack on Twitter.
Do it because I said so, which we heard from every public health official in California, certainly, was the most bizarre thing I've ever for me. So why we're not fighting quickly and hard to curtail some of that from a legislative standpoint is more than I can tolerate. Stephanie, let's get Stephanie up here and see what she wants to say. So anyway, there we go. Stephanie, how are you?
Hello.
Hey there.
Doing well. How are you doing?
Excellent.
Okay. My question is actually regarding my adult daughters. So both my adult daughters, actually. But the one that is more severe is my 25-year-old. She got 2 doses of the Pfizer. She actually has Crohn's. And after she got the second dose, she went into a really significant flare. She had it pretty under control, takes a Prizo. And she had gone to the doctor. They tested her blood and her I want to make sure I'm saying, don't know if I'm saying the right things or not. C-reactive protein level, and I believe the other is her D-dimer. Both were extremely elevated. They told her that it would calm down after a few months, that it was kind of, a typical reaction they were seeing with a lot of the people that were vaccinated. And unfortunately, they never came down. A little bit, I should say. They came down, but she's still having episodes. Her flares are still not well controlled. They increased her Prizo. She's now maxed out on that and still having trouble.
Has she been on other of the remittive agents? Has she been on Humira?
We're just talking about starting that and doing an infusion. She just had her colonoscopy.
In my experience, this has been my experience, that whatever causes it's Crohn's, right? She had Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. Yeah. But when a Crohn's flare gets going and goes for a while, I'm no expert in the inflammatory bowel disease, but I've just noticed oftentimes a change in the remittive agent is very, very helpful. And it's odd to me that here are her doctors saying, well, people with inflammatory bowel disease get flares after the vaccine, and that's not being reported anywhere. I've not read that anywhere. Why aren't we reporting that?
Well, it's funny you say that, because right after that, so the one was saying, the one doctor, she has her regular doctor, then her GI doctor. And so they were kind of doing some conflicting. One of them is saying that they are hearing or reading some, people with vaccine that are having these. And then the other one's like, nope, absolutely no way. The vaccine has nothing to do with this.
All right. Well, it's something to do with it.
Tending to believe their side. My daughter's very, pro-vaccine. She refuses to see that could have had any, even though it coincidentally happened, within a week.
All right. Well, she might as well, not look at that. It'd be very painful to have to
embrace it.
Yeah, embrace it. That's okay.
Crohn's is worse.
Crohn's is nasty. Okay. Caleb, did you have anything?
Yeah.
Did you get flared at all?
No, I didn't get any flare. But that was also all in the same year that I had been in the hospital 3 or 4 times. But that was all before I had it. I didn't have any flares or any problems. And in fact, my Crohn's all the Crohn's have been pretty okay since 2020.
How about your inflammatory markers like D-dimer and CRP? Do you
way
have
down.
those things measured regularly?
Way down. But I'm a tough case.
What I worry about, Stephanie,
my numbers
because you don't
were
have markers.
Well, no, because the numbers before I did the vaccine were right before I went into the hospital, And so it was like 90 times what it was supposed to be, way off the chart. And now it's like it's down to a normal level because I'm on something called Cimzia, which is kind of similar to.
I just worry about the D-dimer because it's also up in clots and other sort of things that we do see from the vaccine, both the CRP and the D-dimer. So she's far enough out now that it should be fine. But I just, this vaccine is, it's not.
It's not a one size fits all.
Right.
That's the problem.
We should be very careful.
Some people should get it, some people shouldn't.
Well, yes, I know. I'm glad I actually avoided it because I have multiple health issues. Also, I actually have fairly rare Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, CMT, and then I also have acute hepatic porphyria.
Oh my God!
I know. I'm afraid that my parents have no business procreating.
So
it's a very rare blood disorder.
Yeah, porphyria is a problem with the breakdown products of hemoglobin. Essentially, there's acute intermittent porphyria. There's actually a skin manifestation of porphyria, and there's hepatic porphyria, and then the Charcot-Marie-Tooth is a neuropathy that's pretty rare in a relatively young person. But Stephanie, the risk reward analysis for you is you also could benefit from the vaccine. We do believe that there is, people that have chronic illnesses, people who are older, are getting some cellular immunity against the virus, and so there'd be an argument to give it to you as well. I'm not saying you should take it. I'm saying
no, that was exactly my doctor said the same, and she actually finally, my last appointment a couple months ago, she actually thanked me for not getting it because she said she's terrified what would happen to me.
Well, okay. Well, again, she's practicing.
I'm a very rare bird.
She's practicing good medicine. She's making careful decisions for a given individual with a given set of disorders. It's a tough call, as Stephanie was and I was mentioning. It's she could benefit from it because she's got all these things, but she's not. She doesn't have emphysema, and she doesn't have things that really, if she got a bad COVID, could send her down the shitter really quickly. And if her neuropathy gets worse or her porphyria gets activated, those can be life-threatening problems or life-changing problems at very least. All right, so we're still going here. This is Christy. I'm going to get her up here. Thank you for all these great questions. Christy, go ahead.
Oh, hi, Dr. Drew.
Hey
hi. Yeah, I had a bit of a question about the spike proteins that was talked about a couple speakers ago.
Yes.
So in the kind of vaccine critical community, I'm trying to rebrand anti-vax.
I like
it's pro-choice.
Pro-choice. There you go. Pro-choice. I like that.
Pro-choice. So, so in the kind of, vaccine critical pro-choice community, a lot of people were really worried about vaccine shedding, from the vaccinated. And it became this really kind of interesting dichotomy because, well, you had to have a vax card to go to places. And a lot of the impetus for, people getting the vaccine was to protect other people. But it seemed like maybe it's quite the opposite. And
so it's at least not if not the opposite, at least is not helping.
Right. And so, but I don't know, I just kind of thought, well, that's rude. Like, I'm not going to play the same game, right? Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, you're vaxxed, stay away from me. But when I was on the East Coast, I was selling posters on college campuses. And so I was around, in a high concentration of vaccinated people. It completely threw off my menstrual cycle. So I was just like, I'm very, very regular. I don't take any birth control. I don't alter my hormones. I'm a total naturalist, 100%. And all of a sudden I start spotting randomly. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? Have you heard of that happening to anybody before?
I have, Naomi Wolf documented a bunch of effects on the menstrual system, but the menstrual system
we did a show on it with her. We talked about it.
My point was it can be affected by anything. It's so common. Even people that are
most doctors will say that. But
it was just anything can affect. Even being around a bunch of young people, you could your body's starting to time with them, just being around all that. So there's all kinds of things that can affect that. And I just don't see how a spike protein is infectious. I don't see how that's possible. It's not a virus, it's a protein. And the only proteins that have any infectivity that I'm aware of are prions. And this doesn't have those
I mean, they haven't
properties.
done enough research on it. It could have happened. You know, we're not saying that you're wrong, but you know,
Oh yeah,
doctors are
I
very
don't
careful
know. I
about
just
it.
thought it was kind of trippy. I was just like, whoa, maybe there, because I just kind of dismissed it a little bit, or I didn't really.
Yeah,
I don't really understand the science of it, and I thought, I don't know.
Yeah, I'd
whatever.
stay in the I don't know camp because there's a million other things that can create mental irregularities. Just
Right.
being on the road, being on a plane, changing time zones, changing your dietary pattern. I mean, this all
Menopause.
can affect. And I know you're normally very, very regular, but even very regular people can be tossed off. Even just by being around a bunch of other young women, you can start to all.
How about wearing a
time together.
mask?
Wearing a mask? I don't know. Mask.
Let's blame it on the mask.
All right, let's get Josh up here. Thank you, Christy, for the call.
Fucking masks.
Hey, Josh.
So I want to talk about the interview with Tulsi Gabbard.
Please.
And you were talking about, the way to fight back maybe against an over-powerful billionaire consortium or whatever. And you mentioned that nationalism could be the way out of this. And nationalism is usually associated with like Nazism or something like that. But I think there can be, maybe I was misinterpreting you, but it seems as though there could be a good nationalism that's not based on narcissism.
Yeah.
That could be what we use for this. Because now we see Elon Musk, he's taken over Twitter. Twitter almost feels like, I mean, who could own Twitter? It seems absurd that someone could own something like Twitter. So it's possible, at least, I think. I mean,
well,
like
I agree with you. I think that, in fact, nationalism could be kind of a respite from narcissism, self-service, serving your country. That's what John Kennedy was urging us all to do, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That's nationalism. That's what that is. That's getting in.
Right.
And that was just my point, was that we've turned this phenomenon, which has always been thought of as natural in the human condition, that can run amok and has been associated with nasty, bad things for sure, but that it is something intrinsic in us. And I think if I remember that conversation, I started talking about Prime Minister Maloney and how she just cracks me up. But she is accused of all kinds of things that I don't see. Maybe I'm missing it. I don't see. And why there just is this hysteria everywhere. Just that conversation I just had with the physician 15 minutes ago should teach people how discourse ought to be. People ought to get together and just talk about things rather than name calling and narratives and running to one side of the boat or the other. It just doesn't make any sense. A little bit of nationalism might get us together, might get us to sort of understand the common principles that we're all sharing, what we have in common, that we want to work to.
It's sort of a dirty word. It's
Yeah.
sort of a bad word. And I would just say, as long as it's not an extension of one's own narcissism, then it's not pathological in a sense, and it won't hurt the out group. It won't become racism and misogyny and all of these other things.
I agree with you, Josh, and also be sure that it doesn't again start to create. I don't know what would the extreme reactions be. That militarism, that's when nationalism and when you're diminishing other countries or other nationalities or other cultures, there should be equanimity amongst the cultures. And this is what's happened. Like this is what I was telling Tulsi, which was that we were in Spain and people were celebrating their culture. They have a terrible history in South America and a terrible history in the slave trade, and they know it and they acknowledge it and they celebrate their culture. England pulled out of the EU because identity as English was more important to them than the economic benefits of being in the EU, that they consciously undermined their economic benefits because that identity was more important to them, their identity as Englishmen, and the culture associated with that and attached to that history, more important than the economic advantages of diluting that to the EU. And now I saw some conversation when we were over in Europe. Scotland is talking about breaking off from United Kingdom, which is something that's been talked about for many, many years as well, because the Scottish identity is so important. So I do think that people can find meaning in their cultural national identity, and they can serve it. And serving is something that people need to really think about, because it's again one of the ways out of the messes we're in here. What does this say? United States many wake now. They will never be able to do this again to humanity. I don't know, Lily. They're talking about it even now. We hear Dr. Fauci hedging his bet about if there's a large, the county health official here in Los Angeles wants to lock us down again. Please don't do it. Let's see.
Back to the period thing. Joan Donegan said, after my husband was vaxxed, I started my period after 7 years of chemo. My husband and I guess, were vaxxed. I don't know if she was. After 7 years of chemo-induced menopause. Doctor had no explanation. I don't know if it was when her husband was vaccinated.
But we'd have to, there it is. Is she on hormone therapy? We'd have to know a lot of things, or other medications.
But weird stuff could happen, I guess.
It would need to be explained. So, well, listen, thank you all. Do hang around for a minute, because at the very end here, we're going to show a extended trailer of this thing I did in the Jordanian desert, where me and 15 other folks you might recognize trained as special ops recruits and had our asses handed to us. And you get a little sense of it watching this extended.
Comes out January 4th on Fox.
January 4th, but
11.
Enjoy.
11 in LA.
Can you play it first, Caleb, or has to play after everything else?
I could actually. I could. You want to play it now?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see.
Come back.
Yeah,
yeah,
come back. I'll come back afterwards.
All right.
Okay.
Let me get that. I have to change my
enjoy.
Cue.
I think you'll
Tom Cigars, 2 more hours.
I think you'll enjoy it. 3 more hours from Tom's.
No, he wants it 2 more.
All right, here we go. Let's see
what
what this. Buckle up.
These celebrities will step into our world, a world that's full of shock and pain.
I want to test the limits of who I am.
Why are you here?
10 years I was in a really abusive relationship. This is about taking back my own power.
Be afraid.
This is not an adventure race.
Be afraid.
No one's coming to save you. You will suffer together. That's the only way through.
Stand by me.
I have a child. Don't let me down.
All of you have what it takes physically to do this. Do you have what it takes mentally?
Do you still want to see if you're able to dig down deep?
What are you trying to get out of this?
Growing up, my sister became worldwide famous. I guess I just want to feel like I'm just worth something.
My idea of this course was about what I could get out of it. Now it's all about what I can give.
If you should die, that's nature's way of saying you failed.
Oh, you got it coming!
That was rough.
Oh, stand by me. Stand by me.
Them, my friends. Those are people I feel very close to now, because we did survive a lot of that. And there'll be more of those little trailers coming. I can... Well, I'll point out this one thing where we first got started, where they essentially blow us up. That's how we got into this whole thing. So it was quite an experience. And I don't know if you guys saw Danny Amendola on Fox Sports this weekend. He was doing some of the sort of, what do they call it when Terry Bradshaw and the boys are there having the commentary before the game. I forget there's a name for that little show. And Danny was featured on that. It was good to see him. So these are all my good friends now. And we'll bring them in here to talk about the show as it sort of airs in January. But we'll keep showing you some of the interesting trailers as they come out. So we appreciate you guys supporting that. And we'll be in here tomorrow. And I believe it's just more calls tomorrow. Is that right, Susan? Yeah?
Yes, unless we have a surprise guest.
Oh, do we have any surprise guests scheduled?
It's possible.
Are we having anything out?
I realized that someone has been asking to come on the show a bunch, and we might be able to squeeze him in tomorrow as a surprise. So we'll see.
All right. That'd be great. And then on Friday with Dr. Kelly Victory, I have Dr. Ryan Cole. And that, of course, Wednesday will be another of our usual lively shows. That's on Wednesday, I'm sorry. So tomorrow, maybe a guest, maybe calls. Wednesday, definitely the usual Kelly Victory show. And until then, I'll see you tomorrow at 3.
Ta-ta.
Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.
Why does my stomach irritate so much after I drink coffee? I looked it up online. It says that it might be acid reflux or indigestion. I'm not sure. Can you tell me?
What do you think?
I've never had a sip of coffee in my life. Though.
Why?
Never.
Why?
I'm scared of it.
What's going to happen?
I'll be one of these. I mean, this dude.
You'll be
fucking like, my stomach is burning, but I fucking need it. It's like, bro, stop drinking it.
Yeah.
Like, yo, that's clearly the advice.